Hello and welcome back to Underlab. Well, here's a strange thought suggested to me by my patron Commander JNM. Is Flowey really the hero of Undertale in some sense? Now, it's not that much of a stretch to say that Asriel is certainly the saviour of monster kind. However, what about Flowey himself? He's just a pale imitation of what Asriel once was. Or is he? Is there some redeemable aspects to Flowey that we never saw before? This video will look at why the little flower isn't as bad as he first seems, and explore the possibility whether he really is the centre focus hero of Undertale's story. Just how does that work then? Well, allow me to explain. When we first encounter Flowey, it's hard to not feel anything but ill will for the character. He starts off by tricking us, then immediately he tries to kill us. You can't really do much worse than that for a character you've literally only just met. From that point onwards, it's as if he disappears, but he actually follows us throughout the entire game, only properly resurfacing towards the end when we defeat Asgore. Here he proves his duplicity even further by killing the monster who was formerly his father just to ensure he can claim the power of the 6 human souls. Things hardly improve from there when he transforms into a Mega Flowey and attempts to destroy the timeline once and for all. Thankfully the human souls rebel and prevent him from carrying out his evil plan. So Flowey is surely the epitome of an irredeemable character, right? Well, maybe not quite. He's an extremely complicated character as a matter of fact, who can't be blamed for half of his own actions. Let me explain why. Flowey never really wanted to be like this, and as you surely already know, he was once the Prince of the Dreamers known as Asriel. We discover as much on the true pacifist path when its natural body is restored. Of course, at one point a drastic transformation occurred. This transformation took place after his death as a furball when his plan to escape the underground with his best friend Chara failed. That should have been the end of Prince Asriel Dreamer. However, he somehow managed to make his way back to the underground before finally dying for good. There, as all monsters do when they perish, he turned to dust. In his place grew a golden flower that the then royal scientist at the time, Dr. Alphys, took with her for the sake of experimentation. Giving the flower a raw dosage of determination, Flowey came to life, and though he remembers who he is, he was left with no soul. No soul means no empathy, and with time he became a reckless killer, as it was the only thing that made him feel anything at all. So we can safely declare that Flowey isn't responsible for the majority of his own actions. It seems anyone without a soul in Undertale can't really control themselves. Just take the Amalgamates for example. They're just a mess of uncontrollable impulses. Therefore, Flowey is showing great restraint to not just degenerate into an animalistic aberration. Still, the way he uses his remaining mental faculties for sadism and manipulation can hardly be praised. However, there are some odd sides to Flowey. Should we defeat him on the neutral route, he doesn't understand if we spare him, and for the first time appears to show genuine remorse. Could this be a sign that some aspect of Asriel truly does remain? Even more convincing is what we witness on the genocide path. After cruelly cutting down Asgore, Flowey is able to imitate his former self for just a few moments. Perhaps enough to spare a little empathy in the player, but certainly not from Chara, who's in control by this point. It's at this stage that we may realise that Flowey isn't necessarily as bad as he seems. While only a shred of Asriel remains, Asriel was a very pure and optimistic character when he was alive. That shred surely counts for a lot, and it's always been buried away within Flowey, trying to resurface whenever it has the chance. The culmination of this is the end of the true pacifist route. So what of all this makes Flowey in any way good? Just because he may have a shred of empathy left, that doesn't make him the hero of Undertale. Actually, it's something else. Flowey appears to have very little motivation other than destroying the timeline. But really, why is this? What does he gain from repeatedly subjecting everyone to torment? Undeniably not much. There must be something more to it, and if we think about it, perhaps there is. He clearly doesn't want to be a flower. He even says as much when he becomes Asriel once more. Why is he so motivated to reclaim his old body? Perhaps there's something driving him more pure than we imagined. After all, his sole aspiration is just to be what he once was. He'd drop his axe as Flowey in a heartbeat if he hasn't given up so long ago. So let's review the facts. He purposefully manipulates others into a situation where he's able to claim enough souls in order to turn himself back into a real monster. As Asriel, he at first attacks us, but it doesn't take long before he realises that really he doesn't want to hurt us at all. Asriel's heart wells with empathy due to all the souls within him, which reminds him of who he once was and how deeply he cares for everyone. This leads him to eventually breaking the barrier, and in the process saving monster kind from their terrible fate of being imprisoned underground. While he doesn't appear to have known that this was going to happen, isn't it interesting that everything he did led up to this? His grand scheme was always to have the power of 7 human souls. He just gets desperate on a neutral path and settles for 6. The true pacifist route opens a possibility he never considered before, as because your presence lures so many monsters you befriended to the final room of the game, he's able to add the power of their souls to the equation. It's more than obvious though that he couldn't be happier with the results. While it's clear that he always had wicked intentions with the power of so many souls, could it be that as Flowey he's always subconsciously strove to eventually save his people? Allow me to explain. The Deltarune prophecy describes a legendary character who's extremely similar to what we get with Azrael. In fact, there's almost no denying that the prophecy is actually referring to the former prince. It seems then that he was always destined to empty the underground, and despite the mishaps he's experienced in between, it does eventually happen. Therefore, was becoming Flowey always a part of Azrael's fate? Now, here's a crazy possibility. Consider this. The monsters have been trapped underground for centuries, with perhaps one discrete way for creatures from the surface to enter their world. If only Chara had ever fallen down, and they'd never made their plan with Azrael, Asgore would have never started up the war on humanity again. Instead, the four were to live happily together as a family, with Toriel, Asgore, Chara and Azrael. If this status quo was kept, would the monsters have ever escaped the underground? There truly seems to be no way of breaking the barrier other than using soul magic. Every other attempt so far has failed. So Asgore's declaration of war was a necessary evil if the monsters ever truly wanted to see the surface again. Not only that, but Flowey ends up finding a way of breaking the barrier without also ending Frisk's life. As I explained in my Sans Secret Power video, it seems quite likely that Flowey froze time before he took everyone's souls, as there's no other explanation as to why they don't immediately crumble to dust. So Azrael was able to find an ingenious way of both sparing the player and all the monsters of the underground. Truly, while it seems his intentions may have been quite twisted at first, Frisk is able to lead him back down the path of good, and the two of them save all of monster kind. But truthfully, it wouldn't have been possible without Azrael. Asgore tries to kill us when we first meet him in person. That's the only way he knows of shattering the barrier. It's only Flowey, ergo Azrael, who has the cunning to use Determination's ability to control time to find a better resolution that no one else thought of. And even though Azrael was always destined to save his people, he likely never would have if he didn't become Flowey. So to cut a long story short, Azrael would have never saved monster kind and fulfilled his destiny if he hadn't become the reckless killer known as Flowey. While he endured a lot of misery and misfortune, in the long run he got his wish of saving all his fellow monsters, even if he had to sacrifice himself to do it. In his place grew the golden flower that would eventually fully manifest as Azrael once more, the monster reborn to fulfill the words of ancient prophecy. Flowey may not do anything of good while he's a flower, but it's debatable whether he even really is Azrael by that point. And the truth is, the flower is all too eager to sacrifice his fake form for the greater good, and the moment he has the chance to escape his evil ways, he takes it. So thanks to the monstrosity that is Flowey, we inevitably get a happy ending that quite likely could have never occurred otherwise. So it's bizarre to think, but Flowey really is a hero. He's definitely not your typical protagonist, and perhaps he could even be called an anti-hero. Regardless, without him, the monsters would have been stuck underground, watching Metaton forever, which is surely a fate worse than death. So I imagine in most people's books, Flowey isn't too bad. It's always fun to look at characters from a new perspective, and I imagine Flowey as a good guy is quite a refreshing one for most of us. While he owes all his positive traits to Azrael, Flowey is still the vehicle for them to manifest, and without him the monsters would have never gone free. It's also surreal to think it's solely because Azrael becomes Flowey that things are set in motion. If that had never happened, there's a good chance that the monsters would never have any chance of escaping their underground prison. What do you think? Do you agree that in some ways, Flowey is a hero? As always, I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't act like Flowey outside of the true pacifist route, and I'll see you next time. Before I go, I'd just like to say a massive thank you to my patrons. My head scientists Asgore and She, Cameron Vigil, Kay Jensen, Sophronius, Mary Morkan, Oodly Noodly, Emily Gatewood, and Zelda Butterfay. And my Underlab scientists Crystal Sleet, Nicholas Dux, Armin Arlett, Marisa Ray, Corey Kidwell, Yushio Koroni, Sarah Wydra, Commander JNM, and Amphrax MLG. If you enjoyed this video, please consider checking out the Patreon link below, as well as the video that explains why I'd so massively appreciate your contribution.